Using my coaching voice.
Say it right down.
Grab a name tag. Miss Ray. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Kathy Collins. I am the president of Do Something Southern Indiana. And although I think most of you know this, we're a nonpartisan grassroots organization of neighbors and advocates who are united by a commitment to democracy, justice, and informed civic action. That kind of speaks exactly to who we are. We've come together to elevate local voices and spotlight urgent issues, LifeWise being one of them. And we're building momentum through peaceful advocacy, education, and community engagement. Whether it's defending constitutional principles, ensuring transparency in our public institutions, protecting the rights that safeguard all families in our diverse community, we believe in taking informed action to confront the threats to our shared future. Today, we're here because LifeWise Academy has entered our New Albany Floyd County schools, as we became aware when it hit the front pages of the Tribune. And much to our surprise, we kind of watched everything going on in Kentucky with the people who were sitting up here in their fight and kept thinking, when are they going to show up on our doorstep? And then lo and behold, they're here. But like many of you, we have serious concerns about transparency, legal compliance, and the impact on all students. And while our situation is a little different than it is in Kentucky, the wonderful thing is that they have walked this path ahead of us and can give us so much information and insight into how we can address this issue. We're honored to be joined by Kentucky Citizens for Democracy. They are a like-minded grassroots organization that shares our commitment to constitutional principles and public education. Like I said, they've been fighting this exact battle in Oldham County and throughout Kentucky. And they're here to share their experiences, strategies, and insights. And again, what makes this partnership so valuable is that they've already walked this path, so they can really help us with this. And they've been kind enough to come over to do that. They understand the legal complexities, the community dynamics, and the effective approaches to defending the separation of church and state in our public schools. I'm going to hand this over to Michael Slider, who's the Executive Director of Kentucky Citizens, and he's going to introduce himself and his team, and we want to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. That's really probably where we'll really get to the guts of things. After that, I will be giving you some action items, your marching orders, as we say, and we'll be talking about a little bit about the rollout of some committees and some things that we have posted with these QR codes. All right, Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to Do Something, first of all, for having us out here today. This is an impressive turnout for a Saturday. We usually do our meetings on a Thursday evening because so many people are traveling on the weekends. I don't know if we can turn this many people out on a Saturday. So that really is impressive, and how dedicated some of you all are. So that is really awesome. I'm going to introduce my panel here and tell you why I have these people out here. First of all, my name is Michael Slider. And people go, why do they call you? People in college go, why do they call you Slider? You know, it has to do with my parents and grandpa. They thought it was a nickname. It has to do with, because you guys just say, remember a big white castle hamburger, and you've got it. and you'll remember that. But anyway, let me go ahead and introduce the panelists. Right behind me is Anita Davis, who is our Associate Director. She's going to be going after me. I was thrilled to get Anita on board with us. She used to be when I taught in Oldham County schools, she used to be my chief academic officer. She was an assistant superintendent and just an incredible leader. I wanted her to go for superintendent, but she never did. But anyway, she didn't want any part of all that political stuff. But anyway, just a fabulous leader, and we're very lucky to have her on our team. And then over here, the next speaker is going to be on my far right over here is going to be Rich Genzero, right? Close enough. Close enough. Okay. All right. Luckily, he's not uptight about stuff. But anyway, he's Master of Divinity. I want to make sure I said this right. Master of Divinity Resurrection Lutheran Church in Madison, Indiana. All right. So, and he's going to give you kind of the theology reasons why we have a number of ministers who are against LifeWise. In fact, our last board meeting in Oldham County, they still haven't voted yet. Luckily, Kentucky is a May state where the board may or may not approve. Unfortunately, you all are a shall state, but I'm still going to share some ideas about how this can still be opposed in Indiana, even though you all are a shall state. But anyway, we'll get back to that. And then finally, right here, to my immediate right, I have John Sutton, who is the Vice President of the Kentucky chapter of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. He's on the Board of Directors for Kentucky chapter of the Freedom of Religion Foundation and the Kentucky Secular Society. So he brings a wealth of information about other ideas about how we can oppose LifeWise. He's been dealing with them for a while. I did not know, much like you all, I'm sure a lot of you all were surprised when that article came out in the paper. We were caught off guard too. We were watching a July 28th board meeting because we had a couple of people going to ask the Board of Education, and Oldham County is where we're based out of, what is your all's policy if ICE shows up at one of our schools? Because we knew they didn't have a policy and they needed one. And so we had a couple of two or three different people speak on that. And then all of a sudden, this guy, a parent by the name of Michael Fox, who had kids at this school called Locust Grove Elementary, all of a sudden gets up there and he starts asking questions about this LifeWise group. And we're like, it was almost like in the movies where the record comes to it. We're like, what? And we had never heard of them. And so we find out that back in the spring, that they had actually, before the law was clear in Kentucky, there was some confusion at first when they thought maybe we were a have-to state. And I think they got told a little bit of fibs. But anyway, that it was kind of decided that they were going to be the pilot school, and their site-based decision-making council had already passed it without ever sending out one parent survey, one staff survey. This was going to be the first time in Oldham County history that a group, had pulled out students during the school day, and not one parent survey, not one teacher survey. And so this kind of shows you how they like to operate under the radar. It's like they're under the water, all of a sudden they're here. And so if you look at their website, if you look at their materials, they actually have a 10-step process for coming into a school. We were already at step number 7, and we didn't even realize it. And then they had to put the brakes on because all of a sudden it was made clear by, luckily, this parent who was paying attention. He actually inquired with the state and found out that we were a May state. And so he went to the board and was like, they can't do this. You guys have to approve this. And thank God for Michael. In fact, we had him out at one of our meetings to talk about all that. And they're sneaky like that. They try to come. And so what they did at Locust Grove Elementary is they actually went to parents, churches outside of the school, and they got them to rally and put pressure on the principal. We met with the principal, was that last week, Anita, and we found out a lot of the real story of what happened, that there was pressure put on her from the top and from parents and from a few teachers. They got to a few teachers outside of the school, which to me that's questionable morals there, approaching teachers outside the school and trying to get them on board to put pressure on the principal, and that's how they ended up getting it passed through site-based decision-making council. But that's how, like I said, that's how they do. They operate on the radar. Now, one of the things that LifeWise will do is they will try to frame this as it is the religious people against the non-religious people, or the people who hate God, or whatever. I have to laugh. The reason I have to laugh about that is because I'm a Christian, okay? I mean, don't get me wrong, I go to church every Sunday and all that, but I was brought up a Christian and all that. We have, maybe Rich will do something about that, but anyway, and we have people in our group who are not, which is fine, perfectly fine. But we're not against religion. We totally believe in freedom of religion. You have never seen our group go after the Fellowship of Christian Athletes who meet before and after school. That's great. Have your club at school before and after school. It doesn't affect anybody else. We're all for that. Okay, so don't let them ever frame this as you're some heathen, all right, that because you oppose this group pulling out people during the school day or kids during the school day. All right, now, the other thing is that I'm going to give you the reasons why it does affect everybody when they pull kids out during the school day, because what they will try to sell this as, it doesn't affect you, it doesn't affect your kids. You have to sign the permission form, right? Your kids are taken outside school, you just go on about your school day, it doesn't affect your kid. Do not buy that propaganda. It does affect, if you have kids in the school, it does affect your kid, all right? And here's why. So I'm a former principal in Kentucky. I've been on the middle school level, the high school level, and now I'm on the elementary school level because we got a great thing where after you retire in Kentucky, I can draw my retirement check and I can go across the river in Indiana and still work full time and double dip. And so I'm working at Franklin Square Elementary, which is right next to the Clark County Courthouse where some of you all have been protesting. Yeah. So I was able to walk out one day while they were protesting on my lunch break to go talk to them. We don't really have a lunch break, but I was able to sneak out there for a few minutes. And all that. But anyway, so now I've been on admin teams on all three levels. So let's start out with elementary school, where they were going to start pulling kids out in Oldham County. And of course, that's where they like to start. They like to start in elementary because you get the kids early. And I think Anita's going to talk some about that and what their mission group is, what age group that is. All right, they look at that as their mission field. But anyway, so what happens is that they brag that we're not going to pull kids out during core curriculum. We're not going to pull them out during math, science, English, social studies, and all that. Well, the problem with that is, and when you work with master schedules, you realize this, is that means that now you've got to so this group can pull them out for an hour, right? This goes back to a 1952 court decision that allows parents to pull kids out for an hour for religious instruction off campus. Okay, and they found that as their loophole to get, the parent permission and all that. But what happens is you have to put the entire school on related arts, or some schools call it special area. And when you do that, and I need you all to really understand it, if you went to your happy place, come back, because I need you all to really understand this. All right, is that when you do that, there is usually, like an elementary school will have one music teacher, one art teacher, one PE teacher, one librarian, whatever. All right, and so they cannot, the kids cannot all be placed with these teachers during this time. So what does that mean for the other kids, or possibly your kid, is that they have to be housed, all right, which means they're going to have to go sit in the bleachers in the gym, or they're going to have to go sit in a study, like if you get older, a study like in high school, a study hall. They're going to have to be stuck somewhere so that these kids can be pulled out for an hour. All right, that means your kid is going to lose at least an hour of instruction. Now, I think it's going to be more by the time, I know how schools work. By the time you get the kids up and you gather them up, and by the time you get them back in and you move everybody around. And the other thing, which John has talked about over here, is that I don't know how you do that. So this is where we're getting into the establishment clause of the Constitution and the money that the teachers are paid. I don't know how you do this. Even if LifeWise comes with their little red bus and they pay for it and they pick them up and they take them off campus, I don't know how you do that without having teachers involved who are getting paid by the state, because they've got to gather the kids up, they've got to get them down to the lobby or whatever, and then when they come back, they've got to deal with all that. And so there is logistics that have to be worked out. So it does impact, I need you all to understand that, it does impact the entire school and possibly your kids who might be housed somewhere during that time. And I really want to make sure, because their big thing is is that they're gonna constantly go back, well, it's parent choice. It's parent choice. It would be parent choice if they decided to meet. I'm like, why can't you use your little red bus after school? All right, if you've got transportation, let them meet after school and do it that way. Why can't you do like everybody else does, all the other religious groups who have, I've never heard one complaint from the FCA. We got a Mormon temple right down the road when I was teaching at South Oldham. We had a Mormon temple. I had lots of Mormons in my class, and they, I admired their discipline. They went to school, early morning school. They got up at the wee hours of the morning and went to Mormon school, and then they came during regular school hours. I admired their discipline, and never heard one complaint from the Mormons, right? So I'm not here to take up for Mormons, but anyway, these other groups don't complain. So this is very insidious. It does affect your kid. It does affect our kids. And that is one of the big things I wanted you all to understand. So with that in mind, the next person I'm going to turn it over to is our Associate Director, Anita Davis. And she's going to kind of explain to you what's in the curriculum that they have for your child. And she's also going to talk about the money that they're connected to. That gets really interesting. I'm telling you, we went down a rabbit hole and we found out who this group was. And we're still tumbling down it. But anyway, I never dreamed that we would learn some of the things that we learned. But all right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I want to kind of follow up to what Mike said, because some of the language we're using now about that is that we consider it a type of curriculum voucher. In Kentucky, we had Amendment 2 on the ballot to allow public money to go for instruction, religious instruction. It was soundly defeated in every county.
Didn't pass in one county.
Didn't pass in one county in Kentucky. So this was Plan C. They had Plan A, I won't go over that. So Plan B failed, they've gone to Plan C, which is to use what we consider a curriculum voucher, okay? So basically, kids go out, get the curriculum that they want them to have, and come back. It does impact every one of you all because it's taxpayers' money going to waste. That's how I see it. I do not have children in Oldham County schools, but I pay taxes. And kids, as Mike said, are going to be sitting in study halls or not advancing in other curriculum areas while this goes on. So the third terms I use with the board is you're subcontracting our students out to a third party. That's what you're doing. And then sometimes they want to go, oh, I don't have anything to do with it. Yes, you do. You certainly do. We'll get to that in a bit. So to Mike's point, I want to talk about the curriculum piece of it. First of all, we talk about the transparency. All right? Used to, you can see it. You could never see the curriculum, okay? Until a parent who was so concerned about it signed up to help with LifeWise, looked at the curriculum, became alarmed, and posted it for others to see. LifeWise sued him. LifeWise sued him. All right? There was a settlement reached between LifeWise and this parent. LifeWise had or agreed to make its curriculum fully available for 48 hours to any person who will sign off on a couple of things that you're not going to download it and whatever. But because of that lawsuit, that parent held tight and said, that's what I want. If we're going to settle, I want you to have to put that curriculum out for others. So yes, I spent one whole weekend going through the curriculum K through 12. So transparency of curriculum was an issue because of the one parent. Now we can kind of see it, see what's in there. The origin of it, to be clear, and Pastor Britt will talk about this because they like to say they're interdenominational. They're not, okay? This curriculum was written by LifeWise, which is the publishing arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, okay? So this curriculum is based on that narrow interpretation of Scripture by the far right, the evangelicals, okay? I was raised Southern Baptist. As I spent the whole weekend reading that curriculum, I had flashbacks to Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and every Sunday that I sat in church, okay, and everything that I was ever taught through my church upbringing. So you have to understand the origin, but you also have to understand the claim. And I'll let Pastor do that because he does a fabulous job of explaining why that is not true either. So that's the lack of transparency until now. We have the origins, which they say it's one, but it's not. And the third thing is the actual contents that are in the curriculum. Now here's what happens a lot of times. People will do like a quick glance of the unit titles. Honesty, perseverance, joy. And you're like, well, okay, that sounds good. That's moral, you know. So it doesn't set off any alarm bells for some people, right? But until you actually go into the curriculum and look at it and see how the lesson plays out, the assignments that are given to the children, do you understand that those are very misleading? I brought, you know, in Q&A, if you want me to, I can do this. I can give you exact lessons that I've pulled up or assignments that are under a title of something. And I'll give you one just to give a preview of it. It was under patience. Patience. Elementary school level, I think it was like first or second grade or something like that. And it deals with Noah and the ark, okay? It's patience. And in that lesson, the children are told that dinosaurs were put on the ark, that there were only 50, I think it's 50, it's either 50 or 60, there's only 50 or 60 types of dinosaurs that existed. The largest dinosaur that existed was the size of a bison, okay? And they did not put adult dinosaurs on because they wouldn't reproduce long enough. And they couldn't put baby dinosaurs on because, you know, couldn't reproduce. So most likely they put juvenile dinosaurs on the ark. I am not exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. That is in the lesson. So under the guise of having a lesson about patience, do you understand if you only saw the unit title, you don't see what the lesson is about, which is clearly what? Advancing a far-right anti-science belief that certain individuals have. Not all of us do, right? So that is why it's so important for people to understand what's in that curriculum and why it causes, we consider it to cause harm to many, because it gives express condemnation of people who do not believe like they do. So, for example, they may have some kind of discussion, and then it may say something about why Mormons, ... or why Catholics, ... In all these lessons too, well not all, but a lot of them, they also have a section for the teachers. Because you all know anybody can be a teacher. You don't have to be qualified really, other than teaching Sunday school for like 2 years or something like that. So they are given like in the defense of, and then they're given these couple paragraphs of background information. And in those, we found quite a number of alarming things, okay? So the big piece about curriculum, okay? Lack of transparency, all right? The origins of it, which we now know where it really comes from, and then the contents past the titles, okay? They do a wonderful job of marketing. LifeWise, I mean, it's truly a wonderful marketing put together product. And you know why? It's because they have so much money. So one of the things Mike wanted me to talk about was the money connection. What is the deal with that? All right, to understand this, let me give you an example of how much money a nonprofit, which they're a nonprofit, $35 million last year. $35 million. In the last 3 years, they have an astronomical increase in profit. It does not match typical nonprofits. And you're like, how could that be? Because a good chunk of their money comes from donor-assisted funds, DAFs. If you've never heard of them, you all need to learn about them. This is a way for people to funnel money to organizations they want to support, but they don't want their name tied to. $13.2 million went via that route to LifeWise. We also know that numerous organizations support LifeWise, have given them either awards or they have given them money. All right, the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation gave them a $1 million grant award for the most innovative program. Okay. We also know they have ties to Moms for Liberty, Family Research Council, and several other organizations that if you've read anything from Project 2025, you know, okay? So please understand, LifeWise is tied directly to these groups. It is tied directly to Christian nationalism, okay? The teachings, what they advance in the curriculum, it's Christian nationalism, and the people who are pushing it and funding it are Christian nationalists, okay? So that's the funding piece. That's at the national level. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the two schools, right? You all have two that it's happening? Okay, Mike alluded to it. There's 10 steps they give a group, okay? You and us and everybody else, you don't know about it till it's like 6 or 7, okay? That is their MO. It's under the radar, and only when it's about ready to launch to a level does anyone really hear about it, okay? So what happens is that at the local level, those two schools that are being targeted, some church or churches probably got together, right, to sponsor each one of those. May have been the same one, I don't know. I haven't looked at your proposals or whatnot. But what happens, they got together a long time ago and decided to put money in, okay? It's all local. Remember, there's money up here, right? There's money up here. It's all local down here. These local programs are supposed to fund themselves. And then they pay LifeWise. They pay LifeWise for the curriculum, for the teacher training, for the materials. When they raise that money goes to LifeWise and it's held. Okay? You're supposed to have 3 years of funding on hand before you start your program. You're supposed to. Okay, now I want y'all to think about that. You've raised all that money. You got 3 years worth of funding supposedly in place at the local level, but you send that money up to them. Who's getting interest? Not you. Who's getting it? LifeWise, all right? You get a little bit of that return back. You get some of the interest back. You are given an expense card to run your program, an expense card. They take 4% on every time there's an expense. All right, I'm not a business person, okay? I was an educator, so I'm not familiar with marketing and business, but people in our group are, and they immediately said this is a franchise and they call it a multi-layered marketing. They immediately were like, boom, that's what this is. And I'm like,
Think Amway.
yeah, think Amway. So, and I'm saying all this to point out, you have these local people who feel strong about what they're doing. They feel like they're doing the right thing by kids. Most of us disagree, right? They're putting their hard-earned money, okay, into this, and it's going up to a group that has $35 million in profit, okay? And if you don't get the numbers, you don't get the fundraising coming in, you will go to minimum wage as the director, or you'll be asked to volunteer. At a certain point in time, you're cut loose if you cannot make it, okay? I don't know about you, but I don't think that's what Jesus would do, all right, with all that. So, Mike gave you the overview. I wanted to talk to you about the curriculum piece of it, all the issues around that, then the money part of this. And I wanted to make sure I also said and make clear that this is very much tied to Christian nationalism and these groups that you're hearing about, okay, direct ties. I know there's other things that'll come up through the Q&A, and we'll get to it then, because we know we've had these questions before. We'll know it's gonna come up.
Hey, Anita,
If not, we'll
before you
bring it
finish,
back.
I do want you to tell them about one thing. Tell them about the question and answer document for the instructors that was taken down off their website.
Right. If you've not seen it, you can still go online and Google it. It's called Tips for Difficult Questions. And so what that was, before it was found out that it was leaked and taken down, was guidance that was given to the instructors. So if a child during the class brought up something about, my mom and dad are unwed, what's that mean? And there's the answers, okay? And those answers are such that they will not get to heaven. I mean, I'm doing this verbatim, the answers, but they are very much questions that children, I would hate any child to be told this about their parents or about their siblings or whatnot, and then sent back to the classroom or home, right? Because they address unwed parents, and you know what they said, right? Homosexuality, you know what they said. Agree? So it goes down the list of those type of complex issues, and they are reduced to about a 3-sentence, here's how you respond. And the responses are through that vein of that far right viewpoint of Scripture, okay? So that was a troubling document. When that became public, they took it down and said we don't use that any longer. However, if you go through the curriculum and you look at some of the things, you still see that bubbling up, okay, through other things in the curriculum and in the training. We have watched the training videos. Someone actually filmed the teachers being trained. Someone from LifeWise is standing up there talking about the dinosaurs. I kid you not, okay, with that. And so we do get that sense of how narrow and how troubling it is. So, Mike, I get.
Yeah, and I meant to tell you all, like she was saying, we're gonna have a long question and answer, because I think that's where you all get the most out of it when everybody's done here, so that will be coming, so.
So one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure Pastor Rich was here to talk to you about the theologic viewpoint of this, because I think it's important for someone, like if you're going into this battle, you've got to understand all the different angles of it. You've got to understand LifeWise, what it's doing, its backers, its money, but you also have to understand its claims and how to debunk them or to address them. So I'm going to sit down and let Rich do his thing.
Does anyone mind if I stay seated? No, I can see some folks there. I probably need to stand up. That's all right. I just want to point out, thanks for the introduction, Mike, earlier. I just want to point out, I'm a father of Oldham County students as well. So I'm not just a pastor that's coming in with some religious agenda. I'm a father of students in our school system. So that's one reason I'm involved in this. I want to ask a quick question of everyone. I intend to stay seated. I have a lot of standing to do tomorrow at church. So.
You can sit. Please sit.
No, you sit here. So, quick question. When Anita was talking about the adolescent dinosaurs that were on Noah's Ark, which is, in Kentucky, right? Since you're recording this, I didn't want to say I'm saying that in jest. When they tell stories from the Holy Bible and then draw conclusions on them for impressionable young children, does anybody know what that is called, or understand, can contrive a word in your mind of what she is describing? Yeah, so there's a lot of, I heard brainwashing and indoctrination. Yeah, they're pretty much in many ways the same thing. So I wanted to point that out. I also want to point out the humor of the Ark story. It sounds in some way kind of childish, right, or immature. And we used to say in New York, the same thing that makes you laugh will make you cry. These stories are ontologies, they're origin stories. And what people are doing is extrapolating from these stories meanings for contemporary society, but the type of society that they want to structure and order. So it's important, for example, to understand that within the ARC, A-R-C, of the ARC, A-R-K, story, right, that behind it and past the story are curses leveled on certain kinds of people. Okay? This is in the Bible. And Mike is correct to say that there's a theological issue happening here. So let me define theology for you in a practical way. If it's Jesus, please answer. We need all the help we can get. Let me define theology briefly for you in a pragmatic way. Theology in a Christian space is taking the biblical communities, please note the plural, and placing them and keeping them in creative tension with contemporary communities. So, I'll say more about that, but that is what theology is. It's in Christian space. Taking biblical communities in the plural and placing them in creative tension with contemporary communities. Okay? Let me give an example. The Israel of the Bible is not the Israel that was established in 1948. That is a factual statement with no moral premise placed to it. But when we apply what people will describe, and I want to talk about this in a moment, as a biblical worldview, I'll describe in a minute what's actually happening there. Let me make a note here about qualifications regarding instructors and why that's important. So instructors for these kind of programs, and many like them, they go through what's called an apologetics training. Does anyone know what the word apologetics means? It doesn't mean I'm sorry, my breath probably stinks because I ate onion hamburger with hamburger with onion before. Apologetics means it's in defense of. So it's very easy to be instructed in a way that takes about 1,600 years of formal biblical compilation. The Bible is an anthology, okay, or a library of books, if you will. We're in a library. And particularly over the last 500 years, when somebody decided that, well, people should be able to read it in a vernacular or a common language that we live in. So the qualifications for people teaching our children are that they are instructed in such a manner, but this is an apologetic instruction, okay? So I'm going to point those things out. Feel free to stop me too. I know we're having Q&A, but I see some people with pens, which gives me courage and encouragement that you might write something down. So let's talk a little bit about what morals and ethics are. So moral instruction, right, in the way that it's presented through a group like LifeWise Academy, uses the authority of religion, of Christianity. And I would pause and just say, if it was the Taliban or Sharia law from Muslim brothers and sisters, they would lose their marbles. You could say amen to that. If it was a Hindu group or a Buddhist group, they would lose their minds. Okay? But it's Christian. And so because we're in the Western world, in the United States, where Christianity is presumed innocent, despite its long history of violence, assassinations, murders, raping and torturing of people, and supporting the three most prominent modern contemporary segregated societies, which would be apartheid South Africa, the emergence of National Socialism in Germany, and chattel slavery and Jim Crow segregation in the United States. All on the back of two important concepts that are developed and created at the same time. Does anybody know what those two concepts are? I know you didn't come for a test, but you know, I'm warming up for tomorrow. Anybody know? Two concepts created at the same time. One of them is race, the other is religion. Okay? Very important to understand this. So what LifeWise apologetic instructors are doing is they take talking points and sound bites that they're told this is what the Bible says. So in the LifeWise curriculum, if you were to take your cell phone out and go into their website even right now, they will use a word called meta-narrative. Meta-narrative. And they say that their intended goal is to take and shift and impose a meta-narrative onto people. They're also imposing a meta-narrative on the Bible itself. This is what it sounds like. God is saying this. Don't get mad at me. This is what the Bible says. God says this. Don't get mad at me. So they present this apologetic approach, which is appropriately and accurately described as not only Christian nationalism, but white Christian nationalism. There is no other form of Christian nationalism, by the way, other than white Christian nationalism. It is synonymous and the same thing. So this is how the rationale happens. Because at some point in time, when people do wrong and harm other people, right, and see the harm, the only way to escape some piece of goodness that resides in the human heart, right, is to begin to rationalize and justify why this is happening. And so the apologetic approach does two things specifically. One, they claim that this is universal truth, okay? Suggesting that their moral interpretation using the Bible, right, applies to all people at all times in all spaces and never changes. And how do they do this? How do they get away with this? They present it by saying the second piece of this dangerous fork. They say this is objectively true. If anyone has done any kind of writing or paid attention, I'm a poor preacher, but I can afford to pay attention sometimes. If anybody's paid attention, people who actually do research and write have to disclose that each of us have biases in our thinking and our perceptions. So when someone comes and says, this is universally true and objectively true, you have a big problem, because how do you have a conversation with somebody who says, I'm doing what God called me to do? Now, we've heard this in the world before. Welcome to the rise in the United States. If you're not comfortable saying it, or you haven't had a Christian pastor in your life saying it, welcome to the rise and the new manifestation of authoritarianism and fascism in the United States. I'm saying this as someone who believes in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I'm a Christian, but I don't know exactly what kind of Jesus who says, love your neighbor as yourself, this group is trying to structure society around. Religion is a powerful tool. I want to point out a couple things about the universal claim. You'll hear it in things like this: the orders of creation, or natural law. And this is an appeal back to these ark stories, these creation stories that are ontologies or origin stories, coupling stories in the Bible intended to convey aspects of where do we come from. Some people ask me, I don't know, I wasn't there. I'm here now though. And I know it's not right to treat my neighbor in a way that I wouldn't want to be treated. In fact, Jesus said that. So the orders of creation and the natural law say what? Well, gosh darn it, Eve and thus all other women, you're to blame for everything. Y'all ladies have heard this kind of stuff before. Which leads to this, an extrapolation and a misapplication of some other things like women, wives, submit to your husband. I'm proud to say that my wife has her own career, which allowed me to leave mine and become a poor preacher who can barely afford to pay attention. I don't need to hide my wife's success. If you know, you know. I am signaling to some people. I want to let you know that orders of creation, natural law, these origin stories have been used specifically to support apartheid South Africa, National Socialism, chattel slavery, Jim Crow segregation. They are characterized by apocalyptic fervor. Have you heard that a rapture's coming, by the way? You hear that? I just want to let you know, if you're a Christian, that doctrine was made up around 1820 by a guy named John Nelson Darby. The only Christians in the world, basically, who believe that are white American evangelicals and those influenced by them. And every person, if you look into the history of this, every single person who helped found that belief system believed firmly that black people and white people specifically were not to intermarry and have children because of the usage of the origin stories in Genesis, like the ark, that the children of Ham were cursed with black skin. White Christian nationalism. That's what this is. So what's the purpose? What's the goal here? Well, it's really about power. It's really about structuring society in a way that says we have the objective and universal claims to power. Isn't it? It is actually that simple. All the other stuff intends to confuse us. People don't lie, okay? So that we can spend the time fact-checking every lie. They lie so that we begin to suspect our own inclination to be suspicious about a lie. We don't believe anything anymore. And so we become suspicious toward our neighbors. And that is what creates an inherent bias in programs like LifeWise. Instead of the learning community, which we call a school, being a place where children, all children, who's been to a school board meeting? Who's been to a baseball game? Who's been to a football game? Who's been to a classroom sometime in the whatever of your life and put your hand on your heart and said these words at the end, and liberty and justice for all. Right. That's a learning community. That's a school system. The schools don't get to choose what children they get to exclude and include. They do not get to choose that. So LifeWise, what they are doing in our school system is disrupting, because they have said that this is their mission field, to intentionally target and evangelize, their words, impressionable 4 to 14-year-olds. Now, I'm a pastor who has pastored a church where a child was raped in the church before I got there. I want to tell you the language of people who believe that they have the universal, objective, thus only truth of God is dangerous. And the stated goal of the mission field is that the other children would then start inviting their peers in. And when we were at the Oldham County School Board meeting last month, we were greeted by LifeWise people in red shirts with handing out flowers and Dairy Queen cards. I said, no thank you, I'm good. I just want you to treat people right. No thank you. But is my 11-year-old child going to be like, yo, why can't I go play with my friends and get my Dairy Queen card? So this is an impact that Mike already talked about that includes the movement of children, moving kids. You ever tried to move kids? You're better off walking a puppy. Onto school buses, getting them out the door to a place where people who are not screened, thus not publicly accountable, right? And I'm saying this as a Christian pastor. The Christian churches in the United States are the biggest sexual predators and child molesters in the United States of America. And we're going to send them to unscreened places with people who've been trained in apologetics, whose goal and desire is to influence the world for Christ, which is about structuring power. And you're going to call that moral instruction. And we just say very clearly, from a Christian perspective and as a pastor and a father, that itself is immoral. I know that my friend is going to talk about legal things and other stuff, but this is a moral conversation and a moral argument more than anything else. Let me say a few of the things, and then I'll try to sit down and pray. So what is moral instruction then? Moral instruction at its best is about ethical and critical thinking. At some point in our lives, each of us has come to the realization that not everything is an either-or proposition. Is that not true? I contend that we live most of our lives not in the either-or, but in the liminal space. And here's why a group like LifeWise is problematic in their claim of moral instruction, contrasted with what moral instruction actually can be. Moral instruction from a dogmatic and indoctrinating or proselytizing force, whether it is
Stalinist Russia? Boy, we wouldn't like that, would we? Or right-wing religious fervor in the name of whatever God you choose. In this case, it's Jesus of Nazareth, who was killed by the state and religion, by the way. Just saying. The irony is painfully terrible for anybody with a breathing sense of critical thinking. When you present to children these doctrines, the 99 core doctrines of LifeWise, what you are doing is saying, this is the definition of all ethics, morality, and how I relate to other people. Critical thinking and moral instruction places people, not ideas, not concepts, not religious doctrines, first. I don't know why somebody sent me an email right now. So the purpose of indoctrination or brainwashing is to depersonalize the human being. It is to depersonalize the Christian concept, believe it or not, of neighbor. Instead of fostering a community and society in which we look at one another as neighbors to discover, and some of my neighbors, I don't want to discover them no more. Doesn't mean I hate them, right? Dog bark at 4 a.m., wake me up, whatever, poop in my yard. I don't want to discover you anymore. But it's still a neighbor, not a thing, not an idea, not a concept. So it's not fleshly. It's in the sphere of universal claim and objective reality, which is completely biased and based upon a very narrow way of viewing the Bible and Christianity, and the purpose is to have power, period. That's it. It's that simple. So there's no contextual understanding of people, no communal connection between what it means to relate to other people who are different than you. We might need to leave Kentuckiana and see that the world is larger. So we have to ask ourselves, from a moral perspective, what do we want our children being raised to expect when they leave the confines of family and familiarity? If they are indoctrinated, they only are suspicious toward other people, not curious about relationship. We tell kids, stranger danger. Knowing, however, I say this is also as a survivor of sexual assault in my own life. Okay? Knowing that it's actually the people we know the best or entrust with them, our children, that cause these issues of abuse. I told Mike I wasn't going to preach. I can't help it. We are told in this form of indoctrination too, that the passion and the feeling that we have, the fear that we may have, what probably some of us need to have, the sense of waking that I think many people in our communities are beginning to have, right? We're told that those things are, well, if you're in a Christian right-wing sect, you're told that those are of the devil. In the same way that white missionaries told people dancing and beating drums that those musical forms and patterns, like the pentatonic scale, were demonic. It sounds silly, but when you can take a group of people and start with, let me use LifeWise Academy's words again, impressionable 4 to 14-year-olds, unquote, and use and view them as a mission field instead of children, whom we could, like Mr. Rogers, say, become what you can, and help them to discover that. We're saying this is how you have to think about where all people come from. And these ones aren't so good, and these ones might be better, but you got to watch these ones. And if they're fellow Christians, and they're baptized as babies, they're not really baptized. And if they're Catholic Christians and they say the rosary, that's idolatry. And if they're Orthodox Christians and do confession for their sins, God doesn't really like that. Because by God, the Southern Baptist Convention of the United States of America and the Heritage Foundation are the only people that get to define what real Christians are. So what's the other goal here? The other goal is not just structuring a religious indoctrination, but structuring American society around what it means to be a real American. And if you are paying attention, and I hope you are, and whoever might see this reporting, the language that's coming out of the state of Indiana, some places in Kentucky, out of Missouri, certainly places in the federal government, real Americans are only loyal to one way of thinking, one political expression, one spectrum of skin tones. And don't dare speak the first European language spoken in this continent, which is Spanish, by the way, because now it's fully legal for you to be targeted for that language. We have a problem. LifeWise is an expression of that problem. So I want to say, as a pastor and as a Christian person, if you are a Christian or not, but if you are a Christian, don't get discouraged. It is scary. As Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, though, you see the most stars when it's darkest at night. The fact that you reach across the river to ask Michael, Mr. Slider, to engage, that we can engage together is awesome. Stay in community, check on people, love each other, and call it what it is. This is indoctrination. It's an effort to structure power for certain people, and you are not alone. I want to make sure, I have many things to say, but I probably should shut up. If you could take one thing from what I'm saying, is anything that diminishes the dignity and personality of other human beings in the name of any God or religion cannot be holy or sacred. It simply cannot be. It is an effort to structure power. I talked a long time.